Founder Generation by C Mullen. The Founder Generation, also known as Generation Z. Who are the Founder Generation? Well, Generation Z, or Gen Z for short, is the demographic cohort succeeding the millennials and preceding Generation Alpha. Researchers and popular media use the mid to late 1990s as a starting birth years and the early 2010s as the ending birth years. Members of Generation Z have used digital technology since a young age and are comfortable with the internet and social media, but are not necessarily digitally literate. Most members of Generation Z are the children of Generation X. Characteristics of Generation Z. Digital natives. They're more diverse, more educated. Generation Z prefers to deal with their peers, not authority figures. This generation prefers to communicate via handheld devices at work. This generation prefers to be left alone to figure things out on their own. Some of the common values that they have. They're entrepreneurial, innovative, and passionate. They crave security, strong influence from their parents, and clear career goals. Generation Z's strengths and weaknesses. Some of their strengths are propensity for creativity and innovation, lifelong learning. They're diverse. Some of their weaknesses. There's a soft skills gap, rigorous self-evaluation, taking personal responsibility, maintaining a positive attitude, taking good care of themselves, and self-preservation. How does the Founders Generation use and consume electronic media? The members of Gen Z have all but abandoned traditional television viewing, opting to consume shows, movies, and other digital content on their phones, tablets, and laptops. The average member of Gen Z spends about 3.4 hours a day online watching videos. This shift has led to content producers to go where the Gen Z lives, YouTube. They are early mobile adapters, native to messaging, expecting ubiquitous connectivity, seek on-demand content, and prioritize gaming. 45% of Generation Z in the US receive a mobile service plan between the ages of 10 and 12. 72% of Generation Z have access to all mobile wireless services, including voice, messaging, and data. Generation Z's top mobile activities, including text messaging at 81%, downloading apps at 59%, playing pre-installed games and mobile internet accessing websites, tied both at 53%, and live video calling at 46%. 66% of Generation Z owns iPhones, and 81% expect their next phones to be iPhones. 91% of Generation Z have had their digital services in bed in the evening. 40% of Gen Z says working Wi-Fi is more important to them than working bathrooms. 32% of Generation Z would rather go 3 days without a shower than go a week without their phone. Generation Z in the US are most likely to receive gaming devices and TVs at the age of 4 to 7. 66% of Generation Z lists gaming as their main hobby. 92% of Generation Z college students have access to Netflix, and 38% of Generation Z consumes daily videos via Netflix. The top websites and apps used by Generation Z are YouTube, Gmail, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. 71% of Generation Z uses Snapchat more than 6 times per day, and 51% uses it 11 times per day. A quarter of Generation Z says that Snapchat is essential for their relationships. Generation Z uses up to 5 different social channels per day. 3/4 of Generation Z watches YouTube videos at least weekly. 42% say that social media affects self-esteem, compared to 31% of millennials, 23% of Generation X, and 20% of baby boomers. 82% of Generation Z think carefully about what they put on social media. 44% of Generation Z checks in on social media at least hourly, with 7% checking in more than every 15 minutes. 1 in 10 of Generation Z would rather go 3 days without refreshing their underwear than to go 3 days without refreshing their Twitter feed. 1 in 5 of Generation Z spend more time refreshing their Twitter feed than even reading it. The differences between a millennial and Generation Z. The main differences between these generations are how they perceive social media. Let's start with the millennials. Millennials love to share. Mostly millennials who watch and respond to online ads. It's really 79 versus 59%. Attention spans have shrunk again with a 12-second average for millennials. Millennials are more price conscious than Generation Z, but also more brand loyal. Generation Z loves to be entertained. 72% of Generation Z watch YouTube daily, far surpassing the adoption rate of any other generation. Attention spans have shrunk even more, with it down to 8 seconds for Gen Z. Gen Z is less price conscious than millennials. Millennials have less higher expectations, and their brand loyalty can waver. But with Gen Z, along with their higher price tag, also have higher expectations, and their brand loyalty can also waver. Social media and fast-paced technology is their norm, so sites that are slow to load will cause them to bounce at a much higher rate. Millennials are less open to experimentation. Gen Z is more open to experimentation, as well as having an entrepreneurial, with most having a side hustle. Millennials compare themselves more to peers and suffer from FOMO culture. Gen Z values individuality. The best ways for organizations to target and address the founders generation, also known as Gen Z. Marketers should be careful not to overgeneralize any generation, especially one as diverse as the founders, but some common tactics can help attract these audiences. Focus on the visual instead of the text. Invest in mobile-first campaigns. Allow for interaction and engagement with consumers or would-be consumers. Encourage sharing.